Nigeria is on alert amid global concerns over the new strain of COVID-19 as the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, at a press conference in Abuja, said over 663 million confirmed cases and over 6.7 million deaths have been reported globally. NCDC Director General Dr. Ifedayo Adetifa said globally more than 3 million new cases and 10,000 deaths have been reported in the week of December 26, 2022 to January 1, 2023. This represents a reduction in weekly cases and deaths of 22% and 12% respectively. However, the Federal Ministry of Health has said it will screen passengers coming into the country using rapid diagnostic tests, RTDs. Joining us now on the morning show to discuss the latest concerns around the new strain of COVID-19 is Professor Oyewale Tomori, Professor of Virology and former Vice Chancellor of Redeemers University. Welcome to the show, Prof. Good to see you again. Happy New Year after a long break, and great to see you're doing well. Thank you very much. I'll just ask you, Prof, what should we be doing now in Nigeria? Because we're seeing the pictures everywhere, the mass burials in China. What should we be doing now in Nigeria?
First thing we should be doing, and thank you very much, best of New Year to you. First thing we should be doing is give us current data about what is happening. I had you read what NCDC said. They're giving you the figure of 1st of January. The world is giving you the figure of yesterday. We are giving the figure of last week in 2022. Give us the current data. We don't know. That's number one. Secondly, 21 countries have already taken some form of action against for travelers coming in from China. And they vary from anything like you must have your negative test before you come. You must wear your mask if you are inside the plane when you're coming. The crew that is coming in with the crew must be fully vaccinated. They are testing people, even after you got a negative. They are testing people on arrival. And not only that, any positive, they are sequencing those ones. Some countries have even gone to the point of testing the wastewater that arrives with the plane. I guess in our own country, we pour the wastewater on the tarmac or throw it at the bush by the side of the airport. Those are the things everybody is doing. People are on the alert. They are taking action. Yeah, I heard they said the Minister of Health said we're going to do this, we're going to do that. When is it going to come into operation? I think we'll have to wait for PSC or somebody. As I mentioned, 21 countries. Of the 21 countries, only one country in Africa has taken any action. And of course, I can be afraid. I think maybe we're worried about the repercussion of China because of the money we're owing them if we go against them. These are some of the issues that we need to look at. Our health is more important than all this situation we're talking. Nigeria must be active, proactive on these issues, like other countries are doing. I've listed some of the things countries are doing. We must put those ones in place. At the airport, in the test anybody coming in, make sure it's negative. Even with that, test them by RGT, just like the ministry has said. Not only that, sequence the positive that you get and make sure that you understand what it is. And all the people coming into the country, monitor those who are negative. Those are the things we should be doing right now.
Well, sir, thank you, Professor Tomori. Now, yesterday, when the Minister of Health, Mr. Sage Ehanire, was speaking, he also spoke about the fact that over 76 million Nigerians had received their first dose of the COVID vaccine, whilst about 64 had been fully vaccinated. What role does the vaccine play when we talk about resurgence of COVID-19? Does this prevent? He said it's precautionary or it's preventatory. It would prevent. How strong are these claims?
Yeah, again, first of all, it's just one dose is not enough. People have gotten the second dose. They're also getting the booster dose. We should be looking at what percentage of our people have received the booster dose, not one dose, not two doses, but those who have received the booster dose. I'm sure it's less than 50%. So the first thing the vaccine does is that even if the virus comes into the country, people who are vaccinated are protected from infection, from having the disease. I'm not saying protected from infection. You can still get infected, but the vaccine will protect you from getting the disease. That's what the vaccine, and that's why it is essential that we must get as many of our people vaccinated. Not just one dose, not two doses, but also with the booster dose. So the government should be telling us how many of those who have received the booster doses. So quoting figures of 7 million, 74 million one dose doesn't solve our problem. The others, one dose, you're still vulnerable to the infection.
Okay. What's your read now as regards the NCDC? It looks as though things have shut down. We've put COVID behind us, and that's why we're not getting those real-time data again. People are still getting infected and all of that, and we're still having the challenges with COVID, but we don't see that sense of urgency any longer.
But even when we had the COVID, what was the sense of urgency in the country? We are not that urgent about important things in this country. So let's not say that. I mean, we have only reverted back to normalcy by not hearing from NCDC or federal government regularly. Since when did they talk about COVID? No, I mean, this was more like 3-4 months ago. It's only when things rose up in China that we're now hearing things. Even then, when other countries are doing this. And I think, like I used to tell our colleagues in NCDC, stop focusing on controlling, focus on coordinating. And by that I mean, Nigeria has enough resources in different parts, sequencing machine in different laboratories and all those kind of things. Coordinate those activities, not control. What we are getting in many of the situations is that when everything goes to NCDC, I don't think they have enough capability. They need assistance with other labs. And as I said, 7-8 other laboratories in this country are sequencing. Let's make use of that. That's what South Africa is doing. They are coordinating and making use of all their resources. We can't put everything, all our egg in one basket. And that's where we are today. If we're making full use of the centers in Kano, Sokoto, and all those places, Ibadan, I mean Lagos, and all those, if we're making full use of their sequencing capacity, we'll be able to tell you today whether the variant has entered Nigeria or not. Nigeria can't tell you what has entered Nigeria because we're behind in sequencing. Yet we have the resources to do that. So that's why I keep saying coordinate the disease surveillance in this country, not control it. They can't even control it. Government can't control disease. It depends on the public to control any epidemic that is coming up. The most important person in disease control is the individual and the people, not the government. Like I used to say, COVID can kill me, but it cannot kill my government because somebody will replace whoever is killed in the government.
Let's talk about this new COVID variant, XBB 1.5, popularly called Kraken variant. WHO has described it as the most transmissible variant, mutating variant, and that because of how fast it spreads. Now, in recent times, I know it is Harmattan season, change in weather. We've had complaints of people with very bad flu. We've had cold. In fact, I think in this office alone, I can't count the number of people and people that we know. And I'm sure that people who are watching know 1 or 2 people who have been plagued with a flu recently. The federal government has said it hasn't come into Nigeria yet. But you've mentioned here that data isn't yet even sufficient or accurate enough. But I'd like you to first of all speak about the variant and what people should watch out for.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the issue of flu and variant and all that. In other countries, their system is good enough to separate flu from COVID because the labs are working and efficiently. So when you come in, they can diagnose that what you have is flu, what you have is COVID. We don't have that in the country. That's the first point. Now, the good thing so far that we may say about this is that it spreads very fast, but there's no real evidence whether how severe it is. However, because China is not giving us information, we don't really know what is happening in China. So we don't know how severe this disease is. If you notice, China has placed embargo on giving data, which is, I think, is unfortunate. So we don't really know yet, but we know it spreads very fast. By the evidence that we've seen in other countries, all these countries, 21 countries that have introduced different kinds of sanctions for travelers from China, is because they're detecting those things and the things are moving fast. The same thing with the US. They spread what is predominant in the US now is this new variant that we're talking about. So do your diagnosis, get your laboratory informed, then you can tell you what you have. I don't think we know what we have in this country yet. So it's a disease, I mean, it's a variant that spreads very fast, but we don't have any full evidence about how severe it is.
Prof, if I get you correctly, are you saying now that all that amazing, brilliant work the likes of Professor Happy did do has been put to waste? Because I thought we were on top of this. I thought we were pushing some work out with sequencing. I thought we were ahead of the curve, like they say in COVID terms before, with sequencing. So what is up now with the likes of Professor Happy's work? Is it that everything has been forgotten?
You remember I used the word coordinating. I said we need a body to coordinate all these activities. I will tell you some stories about Chris Happy's position. The center is in Redeemers University, which is a private university. And my country will not touch a private university because the government is handling it. But we forget that even the center there that is in Redeemers University was set up with federal government loan from the World Bank. So we're cutting our nose to spite our face by not using all these facilities. By somebody somewhere, whoever who is in charge or who was in charge, deciding that all of the activities of our sequencing must be done by Nigerian Center for Disease Control. They are not capable of doing all that for the country. And that's why we have these different centers. So that's why I said NCDC should coordinate the activities of sequencing, not control it. And that's where we have the problem. These centers are there. I mean, you remember it was the Happy Center that did the first sequencing in Africa, not just in Nigeria when it came out. So why are we not making use of it? Over 20 countries are using the facilities in Ede outside of Nigeria. Because it's a WHO center for diseases. So countries in West Africa, as far back as Botswana, are making use of the facilities. But we are not making use of it because it's a private university. Can you believe such nonsense? That's what is happening to us in the country. And that's why I keep saying NCDC should coordinate, not control.
Wow. So with all of this now, NCD is not taking sequencing from Professor Happy's lab at Redeemers, and nothing is happening?
From the latest information, when things have broken down, they are now starting. And I have information that now they have sent some samples to Ede and a few other places. But it's not now we should be doing that. It should be a constant, regular coordinating activity. Collaborating, coordinating. We are not doing that. And some of our states are sending their samples outside the country because of this lack of coordination. So let's be frank with ourselves. Let NCDC coordinate whatever, make use of full use of the facilities that we have in this country so that we can get ahead of the curve, as you said, not behind the curve.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's still on this Kraken variant. Like you mentioned, they're still investigating it. It's new. However, the one thing that's sure is that it is fast, it's transmissible, very fast in terms of transmitting from one person to the other. Something else they're postulating is that perhaps it's also resistance to immunity, so that even for those who have been vaccinated, they're still catching, they're still able to to contract this virus. What's your take on this? And then I'd like you to also speak, because to be fair, despite the federal government's statement on this, Nigerians are getting worried because like Rufai mentioned, we're reading the news, we're seeing what's happening in South Africa, the United States, the United Kingdom, China. We know how much people come in and out of the country. The federal government recently relaxed COVID restrictions, like you talked about earlier on, face masks. So Nigerians are concerned. Can you please share with us, so what are some of the, number one, this thing about it resisting even immunity? And then what Nigerians can begin to do to protect themselves before we come out with findings?
I will start from the other side. Nigeria should be worried, and it is the right thing. But it's not just worrying alone. Nigeria should talk to our government to take action. There are certain actions you and I cannot take at the global level because we don't control who comes to the country. That's where Nigeria should take action. On my own side, I should remember and take it as we have a problem, and therefore I protect myself. And what are the things I should do as a person? All these things about make sure you are vaccinated, get your COVID vaccine, and get your booster. Make sure that when you go into a crowd, you wear your mask. You continue to wear your mask. All the interventions that were mentioned, washing your hand, keeping a distance, I will still go ahead and do it, particularly for older people like us who have comorbidities. It is in our interest to keep on wearing a mask when we go out into public places, wash our hand, keep the distance, and do all that. That's on your own personal side you can do. Now, back to the question about vaccines and infection. I think there's a big mistake a lot of people make. Vaccines protect you from getting disease, but not from getting infection. I think the point I'm trying to say, anytime you go out, you don't know who has the disease, and because this virus comes in through the respiratory route, I breathe in, I breathe out. So the virus can get into my body, I can actually get infected, but I will not get the disease because my body is protected already. with the vaccine. So vaccinate yourself. Don't worry about this thing. So you can limit the transmission of infection by, as I said, wear your mask, keep all those things, the interventions that pharmaceutical interventions that have been done. Do that on your personal side. Then as an individual, and as you are doing on Arise, get that message to our government to take proper action.
Okay, Prof, I would like to ask, during COVID, we had a lot of spending, which a lot of people were shocked at the lack of accountability. I'd like to ask, the labs we set up, are we still accountable as regards that? I'm not even talking about the private labs, I'm talking about the ones government pump money into. Even the isolation centers that we had some medical equipment and some testing kits in. Prof, you're laughing already. Are we still, where are we on all of those things? Because it looks as though we have forgotten, because that's part of the argument the government now makes, that most of the 20 trillion we now owe in debt from ways and means were plowed into COVID. Where are even the materials that were bought? The little testing kits and the materials bought for various isolation centers all over the country.
The government is wrong by saying the money was plowed into COVID. The money was plowed into the pockets of people who are working on COVID. It was siphoned into the wrong pockets. SERAP has taken federal government to court to ask them, how did you spend all that money? We've not seen the end of it yet. So let's not deceive ourselves. I'm glad you talked about the lab. Go to the NCDC website. Maybe they removed it now. They give you a list of 70, 60 labs that are no longer testing or no longer functioning. And then when we started, we said we had only 3 labs. Then that number went to, I can't even know what the number is now, whether it's 154 or 191. But then 1/3 of those labs are no longer functioning. What happened? Setting up lab was a contract business. It wasn't anything because we're interested in that. Every state wanted to set up a lab because contract money was there. And if they gave you 100 naira to build a lab, 50 is for the building, 20 for the equipment, and 30 for staff. Some states will spend 20 for the lab, for building, and then the rest their pockets. And so when you have a carcass of a lab, which you set up because it's an opportunity to make money, a few months later, or you have equipment, you don't staff it, a few months later, they stop working. And that's what we're getting now. Of the so-called 150 labs that we have or something, 30, 70, 60 of them regularly, NCDC reports, they are no longer functioning. I've asked them, have you found out why they are not functioning? But we know they're not functioning because the money allocated was not for using completing the lab. Lab includes the building, includes the equipment, includes the staff. If you take 100 and then you only build lab and don't put the staff, you don't put the equipment, of course the lab won't function. And that's what we're having. I give example. When we eradicated polio in Africa, the entire African system had only 15 laboratories. Well equipped, well functioned, well sustained. We didn't need 194 labs in Nigeria. We needed enough labs that people will have access that we can sustain. And that's what has happened to us. Come the next epidemic, NCDC or some other people will now tell us again, Nigeria had only 3 labs that can test. Because the ones we built were not meant, we have a penchant for building the unsustainables because we will not support what we have. Because the money that was put into it goes into private pockets. Those are the kind of things that are causing a problem.
All right. Now, let's talk about vaccines and vaccine apathy. As you mentioned, a huge percentage of Nigerians who are eligible haven't been vaccinated. And now there's a further call for vaccination because, as you've mentioned, this is a good way to prevent the disease, to resist the disease. Some people have shared concerns. Some people have talked about blood clotting, congenital diseases, and the likes. In fact, reports from the CDC in the United States have brought out, just demonstrated about the Johnson & Johnson in particular, and its links to blood clotting. So some people are afraid. Simply put, Nigerians they don't want, for different reasons, want to take the vaccine. And here we are canvassing for more people to get vaccinated. I'd like you to please address some of these concerns and perhaps also speak to people's fears around the vaccines.
First and foremost, we cannot be taking data of CDC to extrapolate to Nigeria. There's need for us. We vaccinated millions of people. How many of them have got blood clots? How many of them have got this? How many of them? That's part of vaccine, the message that can pass out. We don't all react the same way to certain things. Of course, people will react differently to different things. I can take water and be in problem. I can take egg and be in problem. So each has his own different direction. But then the only way you can convince your people is provide them with the data that concerns them. When you take the data of Britain, data of that, and something of that nature, there are different differences in factors. So first of all, we need to provide our people with enough evidence that of the, I don't know how many, 670 something million people that were vaccinated, X had this, Y had this, and we don't have that information. So if you don't have that information, what people will be looking at is what CDC is talking about their own people. If you check those blood clot things in the DC, you probably find that a lot of the people who had the blood clot had already some underlying blood problem which gave them the blood clot. So those are factors we need to look into. Give your people the proper information and their accreditation, then you can then convince them that go ahead and eat. How many of the 74 million or so people in Nigeria that have had the vaccine, how many have died? How many have had clots? How many have had this one? That information is missing. Therefore, if we don't have it, we can't convince our people. So we need to go back, get those information, and use it to convince our people. There's evidence also, but people are not looking at that, that people who got vaccinated in other places did not suffer the disease. Why are we not using that one? So those are, so you take information. Vaccines, I mean, they're not perfect. Vaccines are not perfect. And that's why even with measles, take your case of measles, you keep giving your children measles every time because immunity will wane and other things. We need such important data about our people so that you can use it to convince people, not use data from Afghanistan or whatever to determine for yourself. So it is that mental laziness of us of not following up on what we have. I want information about 74 million people that are vaccinated in Nigeria. How many have this? How many have that? How many have that? Then that way we can use that to advise our people what to do. So my advice to everybody, so far, I've not seen too many people in Nigeria saying they had very severe after effect after the vaccination. So on the balance, it is still a good defense. Not very few adverse reactions, and it protects you from infection. So my advice is, and like I've done, and I use myself example, immediately the first came out, I got my first dose, I got my second dose, and I went for my booster dose. Okay. I'm not saying that I haven't gotten COVID, but at least I know that I'm protected when it comes to. But in addition to that, I add my mask. I don't go out to a problem. You know, when we go for all these conferences and then you finish the conference and they say, let's take group photograph. Then they say, remove your mask for 1 minute to take photograph. I never remove my mask. If you don't know me from my forehead, that's your problem. The point is that I'm protecting myself. So I put on my mask everywhere I go. So let's all follow that. Protect yourself with non-pharmaceutical intervention. Go and get vaccinated. And we don't have evidence that this vaccine is causing so much adverse effect. Again, we shouldn't extrapolate data from UK into Nigeria. We need to have our own data.
Okay, Prof. Two things I'd like to ask. Number one will be, what is the state of our vaccine stock as regards storage? Because part of the monies that were released during COVID by the federal government was also to buy vaccines. What's the state of those vaccines? How are they stored? And secondly, what's the level of the conversations about reviving our own vaccine production sites like in Yaba that was talked about at the height, Prof, you are laughing again, that was talked about at the height of COVID. In fact, there were even strong indications that a certain pharmaceutical company was willing to get counterpart funding.
I'm laughing because I know about the vaccine production you're talking about. I'm on the board of the Bio-Vaccine Nigeria Limited, and we are the ones who have been involved in getting vaccines to the country. I don't want to go into the details of where we are. Let me just put it that we are making progress, though it's slow. To even reach where we are, the company should be congratulated. Having to deal with the different bureaucracies that occur in Nigeria, having to deal with the different interested parties who are interested in other things, not production of vaccine. So I don't want to go into this.
Is it money they were interested in, sir?
Sorry?
Is it money? Because you said other things. We'd like to know the other things.
Yeah, I mean, if your self-interest overrides the national interest, that's what I'm talking about. We have a lot of people who are involved whose self-interest overrode our national interest. And those are the stumbling blocks to our progress. But we're making progress. And it is who survives at the end, whether those with self-interest or those with national interest. But I want to tell you, those of us with national interest will overcome those of our Nigerians who are there for their self-interest. For the sake of our people, for the sake of our country. We shouldn't be where we are. Our country has been producing a vaccine before, so it is nothing new. It's nothing impossible. We've done it before. We can do it again. And we must continue that relentless fight against all those who are against our national interest. We must overcome their self-interest, and so that Nigeria can take its rightful position. So as for BVNL, we're making progress. Very slow, but we're making progress. And the only solution is never to relent on making sure that the national interest overrides the self-interest. That's number one. The other question you were asking...
The other question is, the vaccine bought by the federal government, what's even the level of storage? What is going on? What's the vaccine stock now as we speak?
Unfortunately, you and I, we are ignorant because we don't get information. You'll have to search. Some of the information I'm providing for you about Center for Disease Control was to go to their website and analyze it as if I'm working there. And that's the only way I can tell you some of the things I'm saying. And when this information was given, I'm going to talk to them. I contacted a lot of people. What's the state of our vaccine? What rule do we have? Yes, action is going on. As for the issue of what is the storage, I think the right person to go and ask is the NCDC. They have all the information, and then they'll be able to tell us what is stage, what is happening. I know. Yeah, evidence showed that a lot of vaccines came in, but then you remember, if the people are not using the vaccine, they will expire soon. So all these are factors we need to take into consideration, so that ensure that when the vaccines arrive, we ensure that we get our people to make use of it before they expire. You remember, sometime in the early days, we had to destroy about 1 million doses of vaccines that were expiring. Things have improved now. But I don't know how well they have improved. So for more detailed information, I hope you invite the NCDC, let them come in and tell us the full details.
Oh, well, it would be great to definitely have them speak to us. But, just before we let you go, I'd like you to speak to, you've talked about personal responsibility with regards to responding to this new COVID variant. How about a national response? So you've famously talked about even the president and leaders leading by example in terms of our travel, imposition of travel restrictions. Some countries have gone for a total ban of flights from China. Some have just restricted or asked for tests. What are some of the things or what recommendations would you give to the federal government now as a national response to this new variant?
Well, to be fair to the Ministry of Health, they have actually made one point. They said, I'm told they will soon start testing those who are arriving by the rapid diagnostic tests, but when that will take into operation, we don't know yet. But at least they've moved a step forward, and I thought that it was necessary to test people who are coming from China. But countries have done that since last year. So we are, as usual, 200 years behind schedule. So that's not the problem. I'm sure sooner or later, our government will take the proper action. I think the ministry still needs the approval of the steering committee to get that done. I hope they get that done as quickly as possible, because the speed with which we take action at the speed of a tortoise, the disease spreads like a jet that is flying from one country to another. So that's where the problem is. That's number one. What will I additionally advise our government to do? Apart from all those, making sure that whoever comes to the country has this negative test, I will still do an RGT test with that one. If you're positive, I put you straight into isolation. If you're not positive, for the next 7 days, I will monitor you, check you regularly. In other countries, wherever you are, they phone you on a daily basis. Do you have fever? Do you have this and that? We need to monitor that one. Not when you put somebody in isolation and say, stay in your room, and then you find him in a labor market, where he's trading. That's a different thing. We too have a role as individuals that when it's for our own good, when they say go into isolation or monitor yourself, please do that. Don't leave your house or that kind of thing. In addition, when I go into big crowd, churchy, whatever, I will still continue to wear my mask. Especially for me, that I'm vulnerable to infection. I will continue to wear my mask. I'm not going to remove my mask because I want to take a group photograph with anybody. I'm going to wash my hand where I go. I'm going to keep my distance from people, and all those kind of things. Those are things that we need to keep getting this message. Surveillance is not a stop and start thing. Surveillance is continuous. So long as the disease is around. Let me leave you one important information. Malawi and Mozambique got polio, wild polio, 17 years after they got it, when they are finished with it, because Pakistan and Afghanistan still have polio. Somebody from there came into Malawi and brought in wild polio into Malawi 17 years after they have had the infection. So this is the thing about diseases. So we shouldn't relax. You and I, as a person, at the personal level, should not relax. And even if they laugh at you when you wear your mask and say you are crazy, please go ahead. I would rather be crazy than be dead.
Thank you so much, Prof. When you said isolation, I just remember the isolation centers, but we can't talk about that any longer.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you
so
much.
We have to revive it, that's all. I mean, that's all. There's nothing more we can do.
Thank you so much, Prof. Really appreciate you for your time, and have a great New Year.